Hey, good morning, Choice Residential. Hope your day is off to a wonderful start. Today, I want to talk through a little bit about repair credit. So let's say you're a lucky one and you get a buyer under contract and the seller is actually willing to make a concession when it comes to repairs. Well, most likely they're willing to give you a credit in lieu of actually making the repairs. So I just want to talk about the best ways to document that so that you can continue moving on smoothly towards closing. The first thing you need to remember is that if the lender gets a document that says a credit is being given in lieu of repairs, that very likely will cause them to throw the brakes. Okay, it's going to throw up a red flag with the underwriter, and they may say, we want whatever repairs those are to be done before closing. So you don't really want to run into that issue if you can help it. So the best way, if you have come to an agreement with the seller on a credit in lieu of repairs, is to just simply amend the contract, adding seller paid closing costs. So let's say you have a $1,000 repair credit you've negotiated. Then you use the agreement to amend contract form and you change it from $0 in closing costs to $1,000 in closing costs. So you've now amended the contract to $1,000 in seller paid closing costs. That lowers the buyer's cost out of pocket on closing day by $1,000, which is the same thing as getting a repair credit or having money paid to a contractor. It's just the simplest way to document this agreement. And it has the same net effect by reducing the buyer's cost on closing day by $1,000. Now, let's say that you had negotiated an original contract that already maxed out all of the seller paid closing costs that were available. So maybe the lender says seller can pay up to $7,000 of closing costs, and you negotiate that into the contract. Now, I know in today's market that's unlikely, but this is a strategy, a tactic, something you need to know even beyond the market that we're in right now. So if those closing costs are already being consumed as part of the original contract, you now have to find a different way to get that credit to the buyer. The best way to handle that is to use a DDRA, the Due Diligence Request and Agreement form. This is the form that you would use to itemize any agreed repairs. But you can also use it for the credit. And you would simply write something in to the effect of seller agrees to provide $1,000 credit in lieu of repairs payable to contractor of buyer's choosing at closing. Then the buyer is just going to get a contractor to come up with an invoice for $1,000, send that invoice to the closing attorney. The closing attorney will pay that invoice at closing. So now there's a check made out to XYZ contractor for $1,000. The buyer can take possession of that check and use it to pay XYZ contractor when they do the work. So that's another way that you can get a repair credit to the buyer without directly getting them the money, which would not be acceptable or allowable by the lender. So again, use the seller paid closing costs if you have room and availability to do that. If that's already been maxed out, you can use the DDRA in order to have that repair credit paid directly to a contractor. Remember, it can't be paid directly to the buyer. Now, one quick note, sometimes agents want to use both of those forms. So you may see an agent asking you to complete an agreement to amend the contract for $1,000 in seller paid closing costs, and then also simultaneously do a DDRA that says the seller is giving $1,000 in lieu of repairs. It may seem redundant to you. It is. You don't actually need both of those documents. You could just use one of them. Here's the main thing. Don't let that DDRA go to the lender. If an agent does insist, or a seller or buyer does insist on using both forms, make sure only the agreement to amend contract is going to the lender, which changes the seller paid closing costs, but they're not getting the form that says the seller is providing this credit in lieu of making any repairs. It is redundant. That DDRA in that case is not necessary, but sometimes agents want to have it documented that that's why the seller is giving the $1,000. You just want to make sure that you are clear to them. Do not send that document to the lender. If you have questions about that, always give me a call. I know sometimes when you're in the heat of it, it can be confusing. Always happy to help talk through with you how to get a win-win solution for your clients. In the meantime, if you have any questions or need anything, give me a call. Talk to you soon.